President.
Senator from Tennessee.
Thank you, Madam President. It's been so interesting to talk with Tennesseans over the past couple of weeks, and it's interesting in the vein that they're beginning to really question some of the proposals that my Democratic colleagues are bringing forward and items that they're pushing from the left side of the aisle. I have to tell you, I honestly can't blame them. After all, when they promised COVID relief, they delivered a blue state bailout, which was something that was not popular in Tennessee. They said that they were going to be all for some much-needed infrastructure projects. And in Tennessee, we like to talk about this in terms of roads and railways and runways and rivers. But what did people from Tennessee hear? They heard all about a Green New Deal. And they heard about incentives for electric vehicles. They heard about alternative energy. And they looked at that infrastructure bill and said, this is fantasy land. And then when they promised to support families and children, what did you get from the left side of the aisle? You got support for expanding the welfare state. And now the Senate Democrats have promised to vote on legislation that they claim is going to make our elections more transparent. That's interesting. Surprising no one, the bill that the Democrats are trying to sell to the American people will do exactly the opposite. Of course, in typical fashion of the House, what do? They give it a friendly-sounding name, the For the People Act. But in actuality, this is a bill that would take away rights and responsibilities from the American people. And they're saying, well, this is going to be about transparency. Well, when we think of transparency, we think of things that are going to be seen, things that are going to be easily understood. We think of things that the activity within is going to be made available so that people can see this. And it should follow then that a bill promising transparent elections would be there to help voters understand the rules, trust the people in charge, and cast their vote of confidence. It would not be a bill that would seize control from local officials and place it in the hands of unelected Washington bureaucrats. It would not be a bill that would make it literally impossible to stand up polling places, and it certainly would not be a bill that would erode confidence in ballot integrity. But that is what we have. It just doesn't make sense what they're trying to do when it comes to voting. Even with all of this, my Democratic colleagues have spent most of this year trying to sell the American public on a bill that would centralize power, that would impose burdensome rules on state and local governments, that would take away constitutional responsibilities and rights, and all but ensure rampant voter fraud. That is correct. A piece of legislation that would do what? Make it easier to cheat. So in the interest of the transparency my Democratic colleagues have promised, let's take a closer look at the legislation they are pushing forward. Like most proposals that they've tried to force through this year, this latest brazen political power grab is built on a foundation of unreasonable mandates. Mandates from the federal government to the state and local governments. But rather than simplifying the process, these new rules would throw your local elections into chaos if passed. The provisions in this bill would mandate the use of ballot casting technology and voter registration systems that don't even exist yet. That is correct. What is being mandated is not in existence. But when it does come to exist, you can bet that it will cost a fortune. It will come with a steep learning curve, and there will be buddies of the Democratic Party that will make a bucket of money. The same automatic registration procedures that failed voters in California and Illinois will fail voters in every state in this country. It would force states to stand aside for activists running ballot harvesting schemes. And indeed, ballot harvesting is a scheme. Anyone who has ever watched one of these campaigns in action knows that forcing officials to tolerate them is an invitation for these activists to engage in a little sleight of hand, if you will. In fact, this bill truly outdoes itself when it comes to encouraging fraud. Its hallmark provision would ban meaningful voter ID laws and stop state and local officials from cleaning up their voter rolls. This bill strips away every common sense defense against voter fraud. It would also inject fear into the process by mandating donor disclosure and weaponizing a partisan FEC against minority political parties. The American people know there's only one reason why you'd work this hard to remove transparency from elections. They are seeking to remove transparency from the voter. Truth be told, many of my colleagues across the aisle know it too, which is why this bill has earned bipartisan opposition. Madam President, I've spent the better part of 2 years coming to the floor to object to various iterations of this bill, and I will continue to do so until my colleagues abandon this partisan power grab. I yield the floor.